International pressure is growing against Colonel Gaddafi. NATO is boosting its surveillance flights over Libya to 24 hours a day as President Obama says the US is considering possible military intervention. The UK and France are said to be drafting a UN resolution aimed at imposing a no-fly zone. And there are also suggestions America has asked Saudi Arabia to airlift weapons to opposition fighters. Well, let's get the latest from Ghana Chichikan, RT's correspondent in Washington, D.C., and also Laura Emmett in London. First to you, Laura. Tell us about that no-fly zone and how it could actually work.
Well, a no-fly zone is very much what it says on the tin. It's a zone in which no planes are allowed to fly, essentially. And what it would mean is that it would give Allied planes the right to shoot down anything that took off inside Libya. And the idea behind that is to prevent Colonel Gaddafi from turning his air force on his own people, from attacking civilians. So that's basically what it would do. Now, we do know that Britain and France are said to be drafting a UN resolution for a no-fly zone. William Hague, the Foreign Secretary here, says that he's working closely with his partners on what he's calling a contingency basis on elements of a resolution for a no-fly zone. And we've heard from a Foreign Office source that it's only going to be used in the case that it's needed, but no decision has been taken yet to present it to the Security Council. We've also heard more recently that NATO has boosted aeroplane surveillance over Libya to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And rather ominously, they have said that that is part of a contingency plan that would go beyond humanitarian aid to Libya. Now, in the event that this no-fly zone resolution is presented to the Security Council, it may not go down particularly well. Russia, as we know, has a veto on the UN Security Council. And Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has reiterated that Russia is very much against any kind of foreign intervention in the situation in Libya, of course, including military intervention. Let's hear what he had to say.
We've already made it clear that we don't see foreign, and especially foreign military intervention, as a means of solving the crisis in Libya. The Libyans have to solve their problems themselves, though not with the help of guns, only through peaceful political means.
And as far as the consequences of a no-fly zone, rebel forces, in fact, would welcome it. They say that they are outgunned at the moment by Gaddafi's planes, but if they only had to deal with Gaddafi's armed forces, with his ground forces, then they could deal with that. So it might tip the balance in what looks like a fairly even fight at the moment. But of course, a lot of commentators are saying that they see shades of Iraq in this. We had a no-fly zone implemented ahead of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, and critics of that no-fly zone said that in fact resulted in more civilian casualties than there would have been without it. We have also heard rather worrying claims that Gaddafi possesses chemical weapons, which is of course exactly the line that we were sold ahead of the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And of course we now hear President Obama saying that the US and NATO allies are considering military intervention, which is also almost exactly what happened ahead of the invasion of Iraq, which is now known by some to have been a legal war.
OK, thanks very much indeed for that, Laura, there in London. Let's now go to Washington, D.C. Ghana. It seems like pressure on Gaddafi is mounting on your side of the ocean.
Well, Bill, President Obama said military involvement in Libya is possible. He did not specify whether he was talking about direct or indirect involvement. The U.S. has reportedly asked Saudi Arabia if it can supply weapons to the rebels in Benghazi. The Saudis have been told that opponents of Gaddafi need anti-tank rockets, mortars, and ground-to-air missiles to shoot down Gaddafi's fighter bombers. The situation in Libya is critical as it is, with hundreds of people dead and with Gaddafi saying he will fight until the last man standing. And this reported arms supply that could come from the Saudis upon the request of the United States could inflame the situation even more. It has also been reported that the supplies could reach Benghazi within 48 hours. So we could be some 2 days away from a full-fledged civil war in Libya with the involvement of Western powers. For several days now, the U.S. surveillance aircraft have been flying around Libya and sort of making assessments. Declaring a no-fly zone over Libya is one option that's now on the table of U.S. policymakers, even though that option means a potentially protracted and costly military campaign. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said one of the biggest concerns that the U.S. has is Libya becoming a giant Somalia. That means power vacuum, radical forces all around, and the absence of a more or less credible leader to deal with. Analysts say having that kind of a vacuum in Libya is very much inconvenient for the U.S., considering Libya is rich with oil. It has the largest proven oil reserves in Africa. It's very hard to predict who will get hold of those riches if Gaddafi is ousted. The U.S. once branded Gaddafi a mad dog, but later joined European powers in reconciliation to exploit Libya's oil wealth. Now that dealing with Gaddafi is no more an option, experts say the U.S. could try to influence the situation in a different way. Reports say it could very well be a military way, through arming the rebels. But history says that the practice of history shows that the practice of arming the other side of a conflict not only does not stop the violence, but inflames it even more. And here is what makes the arming the rebels possibility even more alarming. Americans themselves have estimated that Libya, especially the eastern part of the country, which is where the rebels have reportedly gained control, is home to a large number of jihadists. They make up a fifth of world's jihadists. It's enough to say that one of the rebel leaders in northeast Benghazi was once Osama bin Laden's personal driver. The question here is whether the U.S. is going to end up putting weapons in the hands of radicals and destabilizing the region even more.
OK, thanks very much indeed. Gana Chichkan live there in Washington, D.C. and also Laura Emmett there in London.